They say water is the new gold, but it's not a commodity. For me, it's a basic human right. I never really thought conservation was something I could get into. I felt like I was very behind already because I went the business route. So I applied for seed project funding, and then I got the money and I was like, whoa, okay, now I have to do something about it. It doesn't matter where you end up going in your life. If this is something that you actually care about, your path, like it sounds very cheesy, but your path will find its way back.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Resilience Tracks. It's the podcast where we follow the tracks of the next generation of environmental leaders working to build a more resilient future here on Earth. I'm your host, Stephanie, and today we are joined by Trinity Wildenstein. Trinity is from Utila, a small island off the coast of mainland Honduras. Despite living so closely to the ocean and water, she realized that her communities were struggling due to limited access to fresh water. Leveraging seed funding following the externship, she began installing rain catchment systems in public schools to increase access to fresh water. So far, she has helped 600 plus students and hopes to expand the project to more schools and homes across the island. Welcome, Trinity, to the podcast. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Super excited.
It is so good to finally have this conversation. To begin, I'd kind of like to, if you could, paint a picture of your island so we can understand where we are in the world.
Utila is a small island off the coast of Honduras, and I do like to describe it as a Caribbean gem. Not many people know that Honduras has Caribbean islands with beautiful coral reefs. You always hear about the Great Barrier Reef near Australia, but the Mesoamerican Barrier Reef is the second biggest reef in all of the world, and it's not looked upon as much. So Utila is this super small island, 45 kilometers squared, super flat. There's not one high point besides the 80-meter hill that we have, which is called Pumpkin Hill for some reason. We don't have pumpkins. And the island is just comprised of mainly mangroves, but then surrounded by coral reefs to the beach. So there's no surfing, there's nothing because the coral just goes straight to the shore. And this has created a very special place because Utila is not only full of coral reef and you have all the Caribbean fish and tropical fish, you also have really deep waters on both sides of the island, which also attracts lots of whale sharks because they do love their deep water. So it's a hot spot for whale sharks as well. This is one of the things that made Utila very popular, but another thing is about the culture in the island itself. So even though Utila is a Latin American island or from a Latin American country, in the 1800s it actually belonged to British colonies. So if you meet any of the locals from Utila, they're all blonde hair, blue eyes, green eyes, red heads. None of them speak Spanish. And so you speak to an older generation in Spanish and they're going to look at you and be like, why the heck are you speaking to me in Spanish? And we have a very unique culture and it's descended from British culture. And how that evolved is we have a very Caribbean sort of culture like Trinidad and Tobago, the Cayman Islands. We have a special accent which we call Utilian. The other islands have their own accent and we argue which one's better. But it's a very think of like a patois Creole accent or a Jamaican accent, but a little less strong. And I think that culture really attracted a lot of tourists as well. So it's become a dive hub in the Latin American countries, and people just come there from all around the world not because they see Utila online, but they hear about it as they're traveling.
And then what was it like growing up on an island where there is so many tourists and also such a small space? And again, like you said, no hills, so very flat. What was that like?
Yeah. So a bit of context, even though I'm born and raised on Utila, I say I'm Utilian. My parents are from abroad. So my mom's Japanese, Canadian, and my dad's German. They met on the island. They both were traveling and they just happened to meet, which by the way, Utila is known as the island of love because all of these people meet there and get married. So if you're looking for a wife or a husband, head down there. So for me, growing up, I always had a mentality of leaving or like expanding my horizons. However, not many people there had that. And it was very safe. Honduras is known as a very dangerous country. There's gangs, but Utila just was this little hub of safety. And my parents ran a dive center all my years of growing up from 0 to 10. So I was running around barefoot on the streets, super safe with my friends. If my mom needed me to come home, she'd call and say, "Hey, if you see my kid running around, send her home." Very Lilo and Stitch type of explanation of how I grew up. It was just always in the ocean, always with your friends, no phones. We're very behind on that. We have no franchises. So it was just, I really got to be a kid. And in terms of the tourism, I love talking to people. And I think that also comes from growing up on a dive shop where you met tourists from all around the world. But my mom said that as a kid, I would just sit with her while she's talking to people and I just ask them questions like if I'm an adult. So I definitely think that changed the way I am. And it always made me curious about different cultures. If I see people with the hijab, as a kid, I would ask, like, what is that and why are you wearing that on your head? And it was just that child curiosity, and I got to learn a lot about different cultures. So I definitely think I'm very adaptable to different cultures, and I'm very curious about them as well. And it was just, I wouldn't change it for the world. Let's say the education system isn't the best, but I learned so much more from growing up there than I would have anywhere else.
Did you grow up diving as well
Yes.
then?
So my parents dove. I did my what's it called? Buddy open water, something when you're like 8 years old. Snorkeling, everything, all my life. And then I around 16 I migrated more to free diving, which I prefer 10 times more now.
Wow, freediving as well. That's incredible. That's a difficult skill. Oh, that's on my list of things to do. I'm curious then, with such a rich connection and knowledge of the ocean, both by living on the island and then having such extensive experiences swimming through scuba diving and whatnot. For the externship, you mentioned that you were more focused on freshwater access. How did you come to this problem on your island?
I always wanted to be a marine biologist and focus on the ocean, but then I went to business anyway. So when I saw the externship, even though it's a freshwater conservation externship, I kept on that line of thinking. So I didn't really think too much about the saltwater. There's already some initiatives on the island for saltwater anyways, but a couple Google searches, even though I grew up on the island, I didn't even know this, was we have a big issue with our wells and our freshwater systems. So I thought, wow, I didn't even know about this. I bet you not many people on the island do, and no one's doing anything about it because it's not at the forefront of the issues right now. Whereas coral degradation and other things that I would have liked to do, people are already doing. So it was kind of by chance and by the name of the externship that led me to that.
And then can you describe what your project involves?
So the issue that was researching, there was a study done in 2002 by a large consultancy company, external, I think from the US, and in 2002, they said Utila has a huge freshwater issue. They have one aquifer, and the situation is that there's a lot of volcanic soil on the island. So you have limestone and then volcanic soil on top, and then sand. So that combination, there's not a lot of rain that can fall through and drain through the soil into the aquifers, so it's only refilling at 2.5% per year. I'm not sure what the usual is for other sort of compositions, but this is very low. And considering we have 4 wells, 3 of them are on the same aquifer. So they have a deposit of water and they just plugged 3 holes in it and they're like, we have wells. It's no, it's not. The issue the issue is that they're pumping from the same aquifer, which is not generating enough water to sustain the growing population. So from there, I thought, this is a big issue. How can we solve that? Not by digging more wells because there's not enough aquifer. How do we get rainwater in there? This is a natural thing. I can't really influence that. But how do we relieve the strain on these wells and aquifer deposits is rain catchment systems. This is something that my dad built on our house years ago. He's very much that person, what do you call them, the survivalists that
Oh
prepare
yeah.
like, hey, COVID hit and he bought like barrels of gasoline and diesel for the boats and canned food. So he always thought in that sense, and we have lots of water storage, and he also implemented a rain catchment system. And it's so simple. It's just a funneling system. If it's not for drinking, it's very simple. You just filter the water from the leaves and the gunk and then you put it in a storage tank and hurrah, you have water. And I asked him, is this something doable? And he's like, yeah, for sure. And I was like, do you think we could do it with the 2000 funding? He's like, yeah, for sure. And so that's kind of how all of this arose. Also, when people, or let's say Utilians on the island, they know that we have water issues. I'm just not sure if they know how dire the situation is. So, a bit of context on how the water system works is on the little hills that we have, there is a giant water tank that is pumped from the wells, and it relies on gravity systems to populate and bring the water through one giant tube through the entire island. And mind you, the majority of the island lives in like a 3 by 3 kilometer area, so it's not too much to cover. However, if since it's relying on gravity, if you have people pulling water from the tubes as you go, the people closer to the water tank is great, like us, we get great water pressure, we get great water, but the people at the end of the tube usually don't get water. There's no more pressure and
Mm.
there's no more water by the end of it. So a lot of people fill up their buckets as much as they can when they do get access to water, because the water company alternates the towns or areas that get the water each day. So, on Tuesdays it's going to be in Sandy Bay, on Fridays it's going to be on the point, but sometimes that doesn't even happen. So people are on like scarce mode. They won't
Hmm.
but they won't flush their toilets if it's just pee. They'll wait, till it's like second or third pee. If they wash dishes, they'll use that water to flush the toilet. And so people are always thinking that sense, which is great because you conserve water, but it's also very inconvenient when you cannot wash your clothes because you don't have water. So when it rains, you'll see everyone has barrels out, it's collecting water. And some houses or homes have more water storage than others. So I don't want to paint a picture like, oh my God, we're dying, we have no water. But it is something that people have had to adapt to because of the lack of water. And it's not a great inconvenience. We're a very behind culture and ecosystem. So it's not like if someone from the US would move there and then they do the tap and there's no water. For us, it's just something of day to day expected
Hmm.
occurrence.
So it's kind of because it's become so normalized, these routines, that the issue of freshwater access kind of goes over the head, especially with the idea of the coral degradation that you mentioned before.
It's just we never had amazing water. So it's just
Hmm.
this is the best that we have. So it's not like, oh, we're missing out. It's like no one knows what they're missing out on.
Yeah. And then can you describe a little bit more about the rain catchment system and how that alleviates the problem?
The rain catchment system, just a bit of explanations if not many people know what this is usually in Caribbean tropical, the houses were built are with a triangle roof with zinc. And zinc is like a metal. So the water would basically land on your zinc, it would drain down on the edges, and at the edge of your roof you have, I don't know what you call this, like a container to funnel the water into a certain
Hmm.
pipe. Um a gutter. That's what it
Yeah.
is. You have a gutter system that will collect the rainwater off the roof and funnel it to one pipe, and then that pipe can lead to a barrel, to a storage system, to a cistern, etc. And then usually you have sort of mesh in the pipe to eliminate kind of leaves as you go, then a smaller one, and then you filter out all the gunk so you have pretty clean water by the end of it.
So then the water that is collected from the rain catchment system, is it drinkable or just used for washing?
Yeah, it is not drinkable. You can, sometimes drink rainwater straight from the sky. However, when it lands on the roof, you have things like bird poop or other sort of metals that you don't want to risk drinking. And we mainly use this for washing, brushing our teeth, like simple things like that. It's not like the Bali water that they're like, don't brush your teeth with it. We brush our teeth with it, we shower, we cook with it. It's fine.
So the idea would be that the rain catchment system would help alleviate those other stressors that use so much water, so washing the dishes, washing yourself,
Exactly.
washing the clothes, and then the well would be something that would be from drinking. And so
Yes. So the
you could.
more people on the island who have rain catchment systems are the less amount of people who require water from the usual
Mhm.
municipality system, right? So our family, we have a big rain catchment system. We have tons of storage, so we don't draw as much water from the municipality anymore. And there's certain areas on the island who don't even get access to water. They all have rain catchment systems and cisterns and wells and their own kind of water collection system, and that allows less strain on the municipal systems, which then requires them to draw less water from the wells.
For developing your project, kind of walk me through what it took from talking to your dad and saying, can we do this? And him going, yeah, you can do this, to then actually implementing it more widespread across your community.
I joined the National Geographic and the Nature Conservancy externship, where all it was is that we researched about a freshwater issue and proposed a solution. So I, did that Google. I found that amazing consulting study, which was the basis of my research. And then I talked to my dad about it, even though he's German. He's been living there for 30 years, so he definitely understands a lot more. And he pointed me in the direction to some people to talk to. And then back home, we use a lot of Facebook. Everyone's on Facebook. And I made a post, hey, I'm just researching about this. If anyone has wells or more information, I would love to know more about the history. Had tons of people reaching out and sending me messages. And one of them is actually the lady who runs the purification, or like the drinking water. She's the drinking water provider of the island. And she gave me lots of insights on how to purify the water, but also just the whole well ecosystem in general. So her well is more on the outskirts of the island, and she has her own water deposit actually. So she's like, I'm super fine, but the municipality doesn't. So once I started, interviewing and talking to a couple people, I made a ArcGIS story map to kind of present my findings in a visual way. And once that externship ended, we were emailed and we were notified, hey, if you want to take your project to the next level, you can apply for seed project funding from NGS and TNC. And it was $2,000. And I thought, you know, let me just try and apply. I have no idea if it's going to work. I never really thought conservation was something I could get into. I felt like I was very behind already because I went the business route, let's say corporate. Um, so I applied and then I got the money and I was like, whoa, okay, now I have to do something about it. So I called my dad and actually I called my dad before and I was like, how much money do we need to do this? And he's like, 2000 would work for a small system. So then the matter came, okay, I have the money in my bank account. What's next? I need to order all of the supplies. And prices went up. It's not the end of the world. So we knew that we needed to find some money extra to cover the increase in prices. And then the matter of picking what house to put the rain catchment system on, because it would only support one with the money. That was a big issue. There was like a lot of, it's a small community. There's a lot of gossiping. There's a lot of, back and forth. So let's say if I put this on so and so's house, the other people are going to be like, why didn't you put it on my house? So it was very difficult for me to figure out where to put this. And I thought maybe at the public park and having, a public system where people can just bring their buckets. But then there might be an issue that people are taking more than they need and there may be fights. Like I just know the community, there's probably going to be an issue. So by chance, I spoke to the mayor and he said, well, we actually are reconstructing the roof on the public school on the island, and this is the school that has the most amount of children. You could just put your rain catchment system at the same time. And I was like, wow, this is perfect timing. Then my dad was asking around to his expat friends because we do have a large expat community. They're very wealthy. They retire on Utila. Said, hey, Trinity and I are doing this together if you guys want to give us some money. And we ended up increasing the amount of money that we raised to 8,500. So now we had a crap ton of money and one rain catchment system to build on the school. And we just went a step further. My dad was basically my on the ground person and I was online from Madrid, called me, he said, the bathrooms are horrible. There's no flushing, there's nothing. I can't explain to you how disgusting it is. Because there was no running water in them. So he said we need to reconstruct these bathrooms, and so that's what we used the rest of the money for, was to install the rain catchment system on the roofs, but also to implement the, let's say, utilities or the things that they would need to use the water, right? So now they have 4 new bathrooms, they have a sink, and it's just really nice and clean now, and they have running rainwater.
And throughout the duration of this project, were you always remote in Madrid doing it?
Yeah. So the whole implementation part of the project was all me being remote. My dad is awesome. He does these type of things all the time or manages construction. So, I would just say like this is my vision, and he really was my execution officer here, my CEO, and he really took care of everything. So I was there at the end just to see it and be like, "Wow, you did a great job." So I would say I gave more the vision and he just executed that vision.
Yeah, what were some challenges that you faced by trying to research and then implement from away from the island?
I would say for researching, it was very hard because we're a very small community, right? And in the 90s there was 300 people, and now we're
Mhm.
3,000. And because we're a very small community, there's not a lot of visibility or research done about it. And besides that 2002 consulting project, there wasn't much more. So I had to rely a lot on speaking to people, and people who more live away from their devices, it's hard to get in contact with them. So I had to text my dad, can you ask the mayor, because I can't get a hold of him. So it was more accessibility to the people I needed to speak to, because they were my source of information rather than
Mhm.
Google. And then for the implementation, I think there wasn't really any issues there. My dad handled all of it. He was just there the whole time. It's a very easy construction project. They were already building the roofs. You add a gutter system, a pipe, and then I guess the tank might have been hard. I have some pictures of like 10 guys holding up a giant tank of water and putting it on the base. But besides that, there really wasn't any complications from that end.
That's good. And I think it's really cool that it is really such, as you say, a straightforward solution to a very overlooked problem. And that's, I think, really inspiring to think about how much stuff is, it's just a small little thing, a little extra time, a little extra effort, and then we can get all this sorted. And you mentioned hoping to expand this project further across the island, but also facing some challenges with that. How are you hoping to expand, and then what are the state of that expansion?
So because it's so simple, like you said, it's just plug and play, right? I would really like to start implementing these in key locations. So the public school was a great, because, one rain catchment system has a lot of reach. And then there's other buildings that you can do. So there's a small key up the course of Utila with 300 people on it. And, one rain catchment system there with public access for everyone would probably help them quite a lot, because they don't have access to fresh water as much. And where I'm at right now is I launched a GoFundMe. I had someone who I met by chance at a dive center, Eddie, shout out to you. And he just sent me $1,000, and I was like, what the heck? So besides that, I've had like 1,200 in total in terms of fundraising. But for the scale that I would like to go, I need to up my marketing, my exposure to get more funding, right? And I'm hoping that somehow I can bridge my network and experience and whole ecosystem that I have here in Madrid to somehow help the situation in Utila. The expats were a great help, but they did already donate a lot of money for the first round. So what I would like to do, if I would say in like a step-by-step process, is really work on the marketing and start posting a lot more about these situation, maybe make a page, which is something I would like to do, and then increase the amount of funding, and from there decide strategically which locations I would target to make the most impact. And once I work on Utila, let's say we get 4, 5, 6 systems set up, I would like to move on to the other two islands and then to the mainland. And so I would say my bottleneck here is myself with the marketing. I'm very busy, so it's something that I've been putting off a lot. Um, and it's delayed gratification, right? So it's always very hard for long-term projects to find the motivation, and it's hard when you don't live there and see the fruits of your actions as well. So definitely this is something that I have on my plan for the rest of the year.
Are there any specific strategies you found that have kept you motivated throughout the process, or are you still kind of looking for those things yourself?
I actually have a group of friends that we just started this program called CREA, so CREA. And the whole point of it is that we pick a passion project and we hold each other accountable for it. So I think my best way of motivation is a bit of competitiveness, because I'm
Mm-hmm.
not there to feel like the emotional connection to the situation right now. It's just competitiveness. Like if I say, okay, I'm gonna do this, and someone else sets their mind to something as well, and we meet in a month and I haven't done anything, it hurts me. So that's kind of my motivation right now. It's just I'm working with myself to slowly figure out how best to manipulate myself into working a bunch. Because I study, I'm writing a book, I work in a startup, so everything in combination. I have a personal life that I would kind of like to withhold, or sorry, not withhold, to keep. then
Yeah.
in combination, sometimes at the end of the day, the last thing I want to do is look at my computer again. So the Kriya situation helps a lot with that.
For sure. I'm the same way that accountability groups are kind of the anchor, especially for a self-led project when there isn't those external deadlines and there's no one pushing you to go there. So I hope the accountability group works well for you.
Yeah.
I'd like to expand more into why are you in Madrid?
This is a really long story, and I'll try and make it as short as possible. I am a very achievement oriented person. I'm a workaholic. I think it's having an Asian mother that made me this way. She's always an overachiever as well, so it kind of rubbed off on me. So when I studied in middle school, at 10 years old, told my mom, I want a job. I want to make my own money. So I started babysitting. At 11 years old, I was babysitting two 4-year-old boys. It's a lot of responsibility on an 11-year-old. I was cooking and cleaning after them as well. And I kept up with that movement, waitressing, bartending. At 16, I began managing a restaurant, and all during studying. I had double jobs at one point, finishing high school. So I basically don't like having free time. Let's say it like that. So once I graduated high school in 2020, it was COVID, like fresh COVID time. I wasn't sure what degree I wanted to study. I was in between mechanical engineering and marine biology. It's very opposite. So my mom was just suggested take a break, think about it, see where you can go, because with the Honduran education system you can't directly go to university either. You have to do a whole
Ah,
extra step. So if I went to Canada, I would have to repeat a year of high school. If I went to Germany, it would be the same. So my options, let's say, were limited with the time that I had. I was 19 when I started applying to universities. I didn't want to be 2021 in a university, or definitely not being 19 in high school, repeating my last year. So I ended up just looking in Spain by chance and top business schools, because at that point I decided in business because it was general, it's broad, then doesn't matter all my personality shifts that I'll have in the next year, business can match that. So found IE Business School. This is the only university I applied to. I was like, all right, whatever, I'm gonna apply. I got in. My parents didn't even know I was applying to university. I show up in front of the sofa. I'm like, I applied to university. I got in. I'm gonna go. And they just looked at me like, what the heck is wrong with this girl? They're like, how are you gonna pay for it? I was like, I'll figure it out. I'll apply for a loan. I'm going. And they're like, what about your visa? I was like, oh, I started that process already. And they're like, oh my God. So my parents are supporting me in my university, but I applied for the visa, everything. So I came to Madrid in 2022 for my business degree, and I'm in my last year now. So very short, long form of telling that story.
no, that is so iconic in every single way. I love the boldness of it and just kind of going for it. I'm curious, you said that when you started, business was kind of a broad thing that would accommodate your personality and growth as a young adult. Where are you landing now with your business degree?
So business is broad. No matter how you look at it, you can find something that you like about it. I hate finance, so I avoid that completely. I always like the sustainability side, but I think this is a big issue in sustainability. People view it as a non-money generating career, let's say, or at least I do, and the people I've spoken to also view it like this. It's very hard to become ultra successful in sustainability unless you become, this big researcher, influencer, etc. So I always kind of veered away from that out of fear. A big thing for me is financial stability, and I felt that sustainability wouldn't give that to me. I felt, I can make a lot of impact by being ultra successful in another department and just donate to the things that I love. So that's kind of how I went about my career. And I'm a very creative person. I make my own jewelry, I paint, I love doing that. And I somehow wanted to incorporate that in my business life. So 2 years ago, I ended up participating in like a startup competition, and I found my current job because my boss said I stood out. He offered me a job. Long story short, I started working there, went in as an intern, then project manager, now product manager. And I love this way more. I hate project management. It was so minuscule details, no creativity. I hated it. And product management is a lot more fun for me because I have all my creativity juices flowing, the vision of it, how is it going to look, and speaking to people, because as a product manager you constantly speak to the users, so I love doing that all the time. I'm a big talker, if you can't tell. So I think the way I'm going about my career now is going through that path and seeing where it takes me, but always keeping, these side things that I'm doing to stay aligned with what it is that I really care about, which is, the ocean, the island that I'm from, how I can make an impact. And when I become ultra successful in the future, donate a bunch of money to initiatives that I really enjoy.
To kind of reiterate, the idea is that this career path in business allows you to have the financial freedom to then reallocate your funds
Exactly.
with your aligned values and have more of an impact through financial support as opposed to being on the ground laboring through it when the opportunities are often very
Very
difficult
much better
sometimes.
phrase there.
Were there any particular lessons that you learned from your business education that you have applied into your project or are hoping to apply to the Rain Catchment project?
Yes. So I would definitely say anything regarding finances, projection, and planning. I wouldn't say too much that I learned this from my degree per se. My university is very entrepreneurship focused. So, how to be a founder, how to start your own company. So, when I joined this startup, I had that mentality already. And then, what I learned at the startup is how to execute a vision or something that you enjoy. How do you take that little amount of money that you have, stretch it, get 20,000 people to donate and give you more money, and then make something out of it? So I think that's the main, I would say, how to stretch a budget, how to execute, and how to inspire people. I think I've always been a good people's person, but now I'm a lot more targeted in my communications, let's say.
Through this, you're approaching conservation and sustainability in a different angle of going a different path with your career, but then keeping your values centered in how the second part of your life, your hobby life, your extracurricular life, you could say, back on track with these kind of goals and then your work with your island. What is some advice that you, if you have any advice on this path?
My advice to people who are unsure about their conservation career, if you're like me, I've done tons of personality quizzes, so I know a little bit about myself and therapy, but financial stability is a big thing, and it was always that kind of deterrent from the conservation career. When I wanted to be a marine biologist, I was always told, you're not going to make a lot of money there. I wouldn't go that route. So this really influenced my decision to go into marine biology and led me more to business because I'm always on the I want to be stable. I don't want to have to worry about the next paycheck. I love traveling. I would love to be able to travel as well. So I always felt like I betrayed myself a bit by going away from that. If you're in this kind of situation or mentality, my advice is, I realized through the conservation externship that there still is a different angle to get into conservation, and that's the business side. There's always a way, it's just a matter of chance and finding it. And luckily, I got the seed project funding, and from there, Mike Eng actually nominated me to become a young explorer. I applied last year. I didn't get in, but it really like opened my eye. Sorry, if you don't know what a young explorer is, it's like think of the National Geographic explorers, the people you see in the documentaries. There's a younger segment to that, so they only accept around 15 per year. Okay, a little bracket there. But it was a very emotional moment for me because I realized, this is something that could become real for me, even though 4 years ago I decided to go the business route. And, my advice to someone is doesn't matter where you end up going in your life. If this is something that you actually care about, your path, like it sounds very cheesy, but your path will find its way back. It's just a matter of making room for it and being open to the opportunities. If I saw in a different mental state the externship, I'd have been like, oh no, I don't want to apply for that. But then I was like, wow, this is such a short term cool opportunity to get exposed to that world that I never got to experience, and then look at all the crazy things that arise from it, right? So definitely, I think, to summarize my advice, don't feel deterred in terms of financial stability. If that's something super important for you, don't feel bad by worrying about money. You can worry about money, but then on the side, align more with what you're passionate about as well. And you'll always find a way. You can always reach out to people and ask for advice as well, ask for connections, leverage your network. It's very important. And, if you want to, if there's a will, there's a way, let's say.
I'm also curious, thinking about being surrounded in the business world where perhaps voices do dominate and deter away from sustainability and conservation. How have you faced any of that kind of cloud and noise, and then how do you kind of keep your direction and your core,
Hmm,
keep making space for that?
that's a really good question. Let me just think on that. I think the way I haven't really been exposed to the clouds of people telling me like, what are you doing? Actually, it's the complete opposite. At my university, my ecosystem, it's it makes me unique and I stand out quite a lot with the work that I did because no one else is doing it, right? So it's actually a bonus for me when people look at my LinkedIn and they see a diving picture, that what the heck, and as they start scrolling, they see, oh, she's involved in a bit of sustainability, she's actually doing something. Wow. So it's always a good conversation starter for me. So I actually don't think it's any clouding, it's more admiration that people give me. The cloudy judgment that I was referring to earlier was when I was like, 14, 15 years old, telling people what I wanted to study. But no, I've definitely received really positive feedback from the work that I'm doing. But it's not something that I talk about all the time. It's just people say like, hey, whatever you're doing there on LinkedIn looks pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome to hear. I was also surrounded by a lot of computer science and business people at my university, and I faced something similar, I would say. There was kind of this, like, for most of my university degree, I kind of felt that my peers were like, oh, go Stephanie, but you're kind of crazy. You're kind of crazy for going to the Amazon filming, and you're Delulu for being, I guess, leaning into this career that has, as we mentioned before, much less financial stability. And then we were doing the final year, I just graduated, we were doing final year kind of messages to everyone. And I was so surprised by how many faces from the business and computer science world who were going very like AI, maximize profits, finance, that direction, actually, like you said, commended me a lot in a way that made me feel very, I don't know, very special to. In some ways, I felt that I didn't belong for a lot of the time, that I was going the wrong direction. But to hear people who are going that very different direction respect the work, even if they're not participating in themselves, was very, very touching, to be honest, and gave me a lot of push and drive to keep pursuing it this way. So I'm also very glad that you're not in the cloud of
Yeah.
being absorbed into something far away from where your heart sets. Now, I'd like to kind of lean into the mini segment of this episode. So every episode we have a mini segment, and today's mini segment is the conservation hot take. Any take that is boiling hot, maybe lukewarm, something that someone somewhere could disagree with in some capacity. That is the premise of this segment. So Trinity, do you have a hot take that you would like to share today?
I definitely do have one. So if you listen to the podcast and you liked me, I hope that this doesn't ruin it for you. But in environmental or sustainability documentaries, podcasts, etc., everyone's always focusing on a little persona, and that persona is a cute little animal or someone that you can follow along in the story. So even in the when we started the externship, they were like, it's better if you put a person or like little animal that you can resonate with and sympathize with, etc. I don't, although I'm a sucker for cute little animals and like all the documentaries, I cry if like the little deer dies or something. I just don't think, I think this presents the wrong idea. In a way, yes, it connects them with that animal, but they're not focusing on, what actually matters, which is usually the environment. Mangroves are important, our coral reefs are important. If you're presenting a documentary about how the importance of coral reefs and take me through a small animal's journey, you're I find a lot of people's memory is about that creature's journey and less about the ecosystem as a whole. And I think it should be a bit more repositioned to go away from that. Just focus on the ecosystem. The ecosystem's the cute little baby, that should be protected and not necessarily a crap. And that's my hot take. And if you guys disagree or want to argue or debate, you can text me on LinkedIn or something and then we can talk about it.
No, I really appreciate that hot take as well, because I think there, as you say, there is. the token species that are kind of the characters of the conservation movement and presents a very animal centric view of how the world works. Like we preserve, I don't know, spider monkeys, for example, because we like spider monkeys, and hopefully, like luckily, a lot of conservation work that is animal centric does have cascading effects to the ecosystem. But there is also a whole other side of things in strategy where we are focused on the entanglements and the networks that exist between them, and that will probably cascade much more successfully than focusing on one token charismatic species. There's a really great book called The Mushrooms at the End of the World, which is not really about this necessarily, but it's actually more about how mushrooms can be this proxy to exploring capitalism and a world beyond capitalism, which is kind of crazy. But kind of the focus is how fungi, as a premise, deviate from the very ordered way that we understand the world in terms of the simplest things of how a fungi can exist in the most, I guess, toxic environment that we imagine that no animal could occur in, or the idea that the lichen, the transition between fungi to tree roots, is so indistinguishable that you can't really even see where the fungi ends and where the tree root starts. So, kind of really challenging this idea of separating species from one another. And as you say, focusing on that ecosystem, focusing on how everything connects into one larger mass and one larger entity as opposed to the collection of a bunch of individuals. I think that's a really cool way to kind of re-envision storytelling as well. And how can we better understand our system instead of anchoring to those individual, simple story mechanisms?
Just a quick example of this is how I'm implementing what my hot take is I'm writing a children's illustration book, and instead of saying, um, this is this little fish and this is we're only going to talk about this little fish, the story goes with that little fish, but he goes and speaks to different coral, so it's still kind of that animalistic representation, but you're
Mm-hmm.
also adding more to it and kind of creating multiple animalistic representations, which in turn is representing a whole ecosystem, right? So there's definitely a way to combine these two, and I definitely think it is a new way to storytell, but there needs to be more importance on the, like, let's say a coral and not so much a shark. It's
Mm-hmm.
what is really important is the base of everything, which is the ecosystem.
So also spreading kind of the attention to species that have been
Yes.
less recognized in that way. I'm curious about the children's book. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so it's in the works. I just debated either painting it myself or hiring an illustrator that I met, and in the end I decided to hire an illustrator, but it's Otto's Ocean Adventures. It's a small juvenile cowfish where she will take you through her little ocean adventures. And the first book that I'm doing is about the coral reef. So she'll go about meeting different coral, saying hi to the wise brain coral or the staghorn coral, and kind of the plot is eventually she meets a coral that looks dead, right? Coral degradation is a big thing. I see it every time I go home. And she's going to ask it, why are you so sad? And basically, it's going to list in a very simple way for kids ages 3 to 5, when people step on me, if the water heats up, if the garbage is tying around me, I'm a living thing. And, together everyone works to try and repair this coral. Obviously, for the sake of a children's book, the coral will be healthier by the end of it. But I want to create future ocean enthusiasts, and I think teaching them in a very fun way, very young, is a great way to do that, because you end up remembering a lot of these rhymes as a kid, and you'll just start remembering these concepts, and it will expose your world a bit more or grow your perception of the world a bit more. So that's kind of what I'm doing. By March, I want to have everything listed on Amazon and start selling it. So that's my timeline for that.
Like, that's awesome. So will the book rhyme or?
Yes. It's kind of Doctor Who or Are You My Mother kind of rhyming. It was always something super fun for me when I read books as a kid, and based on research, it's actually something that kids enjoy as well.
Oh, that's so awesome. And how did you come up with this idea and decide to pursue it as well?
I've always loved kids. I started babysitting at 10. I have a little sister. It's always just been something, a part of me. and I love teaching. I'm tutor all the time. I don't know. It's just something that like my energy comes out with. And I always knew that I wanted to write a children's book. I don't know. It's just like in the back of my memory, I can't remember the moment where I decided I was going to do this. It's always just been something. And I've been saying it for years that I was going to do it. And this is the year I actually did something about it and I'm actually doing it. So again, bringing my business experience, a lot of research, a lot of consulting other people that, help me execute that a bit quickly.
And what has been your process from going to the idea of the book into kind of in writing the script and then deciding to hire an illustrator as well?
The process, I already knew what I wanted to write it about, the coral and everything. I just had to, make sure that things were correct. So a bit researching and, I've worked in coral cleaning and restoration a bit. So I know staghorn coral is very resilient. So I knew this was going to be the one that would bounce back. It would be sick, but then it would bounce back because it does, based on research and experimentation. So it kind of just went that. And with the rhymes, ChatGPT helped me a lot. I'm not the best at rhyming, but I'd be like, okay, I want this to say this, and then it would propose a couple things, and then I run it through my mom. And with illustrators, I went through Fiverr, and I found I just got to talk to so many people, and it was something that I was really unsure about because I wanted to have a bit more emotion behind it, so that's why I wanted to paint it. But again, for me, I spoke about it before, like the motivation. I knew that if I had to paint it, it's a very big project, and with the limited time and the billion things that I'm doing right now, I was like, look, just get the first book done, and then if you want to paint the next one, you can do it, but just prove to yourself first that you can do this, and then it'll kind of get the ball rolling, and then after that I can worry about painting on my own. So in terms of the illustrator, it was more strategic decision on execution because I wanted to make sure that it's actually going to get done and not that it will always be something that I've been saying for the last 6 years, let's say.
That makes complete sense. And then for this book, will it be self-published or you have a publisher kind of?
Self-published. I don't want to deal with a publisher. So I'm doing it
Sure.
on my own and just publishing. Amazon is great with the KDP, and you just get a barcode and then you can upload it there, and people, it's a print, like you order it and it prints it. So I don't have to worry about stock, which is another thing, financial stability and whatnot. And then I'll print a bunch and take them home with me to sell in person there.
Oh my gosh, that is so exciting. I'm so excited. I'll mark my calendar for March for when it's released. I'm
I'll
excited to
post it
see.
and I'll let you know.
You said that you came with a quote for related to nature. Would you be interested in sharing that?
Yeah, so the quote that I wanted to bring is actually something that I thought of as I was creating this whole rain catchment system and doing the research. But, they say water is the new gold. And when you say this, it's referring to it as a commodity, right? So they say water is the new gold, but it's not a commodity. For me, it's a basic human right. And I think, the quote in itself of water is the new gold is very misleading because it adds a lot of inaccessibility to water. But for me, this is something that's anyone's basic human right, and it should be accessible to anyone. So that's my quote. They say water is the new gold, but it's not a commodity to profit from. It's a basic human right.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And before we leave, if anyone listening would like to reach out to you or learn more about your work, where can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. My name's, I hope you can write it somewhere or something or spell it out, but Trinity Wildenstein Shigatomi. And you can reach out to me there. I'm always happy to talk, share ideas, give mentorship. It's something I really enjoy, so don't feel shy for reaching out. And on my LinkedIn, you can see the different projects that I was doing, a bit more on the rain catchment system. It's all there, and you can read more.
All right, well, thank you, Trinity, so much for joining us today. It was
Thanks.
such a pleasure to hear your story from the rain catchment system on your island, then to business, and then this new children's book. So many exciting things in the work, and to hear your process through that all is very inspiring for sure. So, this was the Resilience Tracks podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned for the next episode.
Thanks for having me, Stephanie.